This presentation is going to focus on two states, which are California and Alabama, and how these two states handle their death penalty differently. And we will look at the facts of Alabama, and we will also look at the facts for California and look at how there are different types of leadership in both states in regard to the governor and their different political agendas. Alabama was the last state to abolish judge override, which gave a judge the power to overrule a jury sentencing determination. So if the jury came up with the verdict of life imprisonment for that individual, a judge had the power to overturn that decision and sentence them to death row instead. Judges in the state of Alabama utilized their powers to change the verdict from life imprisonment to the death penalty, which I stated previously. Since the year of 1976, Alabama judges have overridden jury verdicts 112 times, and about 91% of the overrides resulted in imposing the death penalty. Alabama is stated to have one of the nation's highest per capita execution rates, with 67 executions and 9 exonerations since the year of 1976. There is an estimation of about 20%, which accounts for people on death row that were sentenced to death by elected judges who overrode jury life verdicts. Alabama is the highest state in sentencing with the death penalty because of how long the state made the judge override power available to them. These numbers were recognized by the United States Supreme Court, which later resulted in the abolishment of judicial override. The possible reasoning for this was that trial judges campaigned on their records of imposing death. Also, there was a possibility of racial discrimination and sentencing of young individuals who were not in the right state of mind during the year of 1976, in which judges were more likely to sentence this category of individuals to the death penalty, and why we see so many people on death row right now. California voters still support capital punishment and keeping the death penalty for serious crimes that are committed. It seems that California voters recognize the death penalty as a sufficient punishment that is deserving for people who commit murder. This is proven to be true because voters in California had a chance to abolish the death penalty with Proposition 62 in 2016. Proposition 62 was a California ballot proposition that stated it would repeal the death penalty and replace it with life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Almost 54% of California voters rejected Proposition 62 and wanted to keep the death penalty. In 1993, methods of execution were changing again in the state of California with the option of lethal injection. The inmates sitting on death row had the option of choosing either lethal gas or lethal injection for their own death. But in 2006, an inmate stated that the lethal injection would subject him to unnecessary risk of excessive pain and violate the Eighth Amendment's prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment. California seems to be changing methods of execution rather often, and inmates make it difficult to stick to one primary method of execution while they await their death on death row. Kay Ivey is the governor of the state of Alabama and follows a very conservative agenda. She belongs to the state's Republican Party, which has had a supermajority in both houses of the legislature. Kay Ivey values human life so much that she signed an anti-abortion bill into law, which makes it rather confusing because she pays no attention to reforming the death penalty that they have in their current states, which is Alabama. She signed a new law, which is called the Fair Justice Act, which reduced the appeals time in capital cases by requiring convicted persons to file post-conviction claims at the same time as appeals. These cases include death row inmates, and the Fair Justice Act is now likely to lead to wrongfully convicted individuals being executed before they can provide evidence of their innocence. This is not fair because the state of Alabama does not provide lawyers for poor defendants after the direct appeals are over, which leaves it up to someone who is willing to volunteer at that point. On the other hand, we have Governor Gavin Newsom. He is the governor for the state of California, and he believes that the death penalty has discriminated against people of color. Newsom also believes that having the death penalty still is a waste of taxpayer dollars. He signed an executive order that declared a moratorium on executions on California's 737 inmates on death row. Newsom also ordered a withdrawal of California's lethal injection protocol and calls for the immediate closure of the execution chamber at San Quentin State Prison. Compared to the state of Alabama, leadership roles are very different, as well as their political agenda. Governor Ivey follows a very Republican agenda and does not focus on abolishing the death penalty anytime soon in the state of Alabama. And we have Governor Gavin Newsom, which is a Democrat, and he went against on what California voters truly wanted in regard to the death penalty.